Have you ever been in a place where you're unsure of what's next? It seems like the odds in front of you are absolutely insurmountable, and where you are seems like a totally hopeless position. I'm not here today to tell you that God is always going to be in exactly the place that you want, but I am here to tell you that when we walk in the path with God, when we walk in that step, when we learn to discern His voice, then we come to a place where there is no army, no future, nothing ahead of us that can stop, because we stand in the way with God. I want to explore that with you through the eyes of the prophet Elisha today. An incredible story, supernatural in so many different ways, of how God delivers him and how he can walk in front of an entire face of an army that has been plaguing his nation with zero fear, because his relationship with the Lord. Let's explore that together right after this. When I was young, I used to be terrified of the dark, like absolutely petrified of it. I can remember one night in particular where I stayed up almost all night with my flashlight pointing at my closet, because I was afraid that if there wasn't light on that closet, there were monsters that were going to come out and absolutely devour me. One movie that always stuck with me growing up was, I think it's Ernest Goes to Camp. It's like a Halloween special. Terrifying, because there's these gremlins that sleep underneath kids' beds and can emulate their parents' voices calling for them to come and get cookies. But the moment that they put their foot over the bed, they get grabbed, dragged underneath the bed, and are never heard from again. The movie ends with, I think Ernest has to show them love. So they put milk into super soakers and they spray them. The ending never stuck with me. What did stick with me were all of the frightening scenes that came up. Fear is a very powerful emotion. It's powerful because it's primal. It's powerful because it drives us. It causes a physical, psychological reaction that demands us to answer. So whether it's the irrationality of a child who's afraid of the dark, or who's watched a movie and believes that things are true, our imagination does things that it's trying to protect us. What happens when that leads us astray? When our fear becomes more powerful than our faith? Those are the times where maybe we need to stop and reevaluate exactly what it is that we're depending on. As I've grown older, maybe my fears have become a little bit less. God has taken me to some very interesting places around the world, places that in and of themselves are terrifying. I can remember the leaping, crazy fast spiders of Fiji, or the monkeys that would attack you in India, or just the reality of disease, famine, all of those pieces. It's good to have a healthy fear, right? Before I travel to a place that I've never been before, I make sure that I've got all the medical things that I need. I've made sure that I've crossed my T's and dotted my I's. I make sure my passport's in order. I make sure that my backpack is ready to go. And in some of those places, you flip it around so that it's on the front of you. Why? That's practical. But fear is not the thing that should drive where we go. Because in the same way, when my wife and I were in India a few years ago, and you get an opportunity to walk into the brothels of Calcutta to share the gospel, to observe this firsthand, yeah, I'm a little afraid. But I trust who I'm with. I trust the one in whom I'm worship. And therefore, I'm willing and able to walk into that place without any fear at all. Today's story is about fear. It's about overcoming and seeing with supernatural eyes. Elisha is a prophet in the Old Testament who follows another incredible prophet, Elijah. Elijah, who confronts an entire nation who's walked away from God and remains victorious. And yet when his life is threatened, he has to run. He's exhausted. He doesn't even want to keep his life anymore. And so God sends him an apprentice, someone to walk alongside him, Elisha. And not long before today's passage, Elijah has gone up into heaven. God sent chariots of fire. They separated the two of them, and Elijah ascends into heaven, never to be seen again. And Elisha's power is exponentially more. Not because of him, but because of his trust in the Lord. He takes his cloak, he slaps it on water, and it splits, right? We're hearkening back to Moses and all of these different pieces as God is establishing Elisha as a prophet, as a judge over the whole nation of Israel. So today, you can turn with me to 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6, and we're going to read from verses 8 through to 23. 8 through to 23. This is in the Old Testament. It's like maybe 25%, 30% of the way through the Old Testament. And the nation of Israel has returned from Egypt. They've gone through a period of judges and all of these pieces, and then they've established their kings. And the kings have pieces where they go to God and away from God, to God and away from God. And into this, the prophet Elisha is speaking. Let's read this together, and we'll explore what this means both in its context and in our context. Verse 8, chapter 6, 2 Kings. Now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such and such a place. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king, so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, will you not tell me which of us, which of you, is on the side of the king of Israel? None of us, my lord the king, said one of his officers. But Elisha, the prophet in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Go, find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. The report came back. He is in Dothan. So he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, O Lord, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened his servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. As the enemy came down towards him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, strike these people with blindness. So he, the Lord, struck them with blindness as Elisha had asked. Elisha told them, this is not the road, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I'll lead you to the man you're looking for. And he led them to Samaria. After they entered the city, Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men so that they can see. Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and there they were inside Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, shall I kill them? My father, shall I kill them? Do not kill them, he answered. Would you kill men you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them. And after they'd finished eating and drinking, he sent them away, and they returned to their master. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. The word of the Lord. Let's pray. God, we come before you today with fears, with doubts, with huge questions in front of us, insurmountable obstacles. God, give us your eyes, give us your sight, that it would not be our fear that guides us, that it would not be misplaced faith, that it would not be some sense of selfish ambition, but that it would just be you. Lord, those who are with us are greater than those who are against us. I trust that because I walk with you. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O God. Amen. What a story, hey? It's crazy. It's supernatural. It's bizarre. Just when you stop to think about what's going on. You've got this king who has been at war with Israel. He makes his plans. He sends his raiding parties in. They're more powerful than the Israelites. They've done their scouting. They know where the Israelite king is going to be. And then every time you're about to get him, they don't show up. He goes around. He avoids your trap every single time. So it makes perfect sense that the king of Aram is going to call all of his officers together, because the natural explanation is one of you is a snitch. I have a spy in my court, and I'm going to find him, and I'm going to kill him, and then we're going to go get that king of Israel. Shaking boots in that king's court that day, I think. Just takes one. His anger is enough, and I'm sure that most of those other officers would happily turn on that individual. Sure, as long as it's not me, get him. But then one brave officer speaks up. Lord, it's not me. It's not any of us. It's actually the prophet, the man of God in Israel. He's the one who's warning the king. Interesting that an officer of another nation recognizes the power of the prophet of God to know these things. Even when you whisper it in your sleep, he knows. We'll come back. Actually, no, let's just explore that right now. I think sometimes in our Western mind, I'm in the West, we like to naturalize things. We like to come up with natural causes for why this could be happening. Maybe Elisha has a spy in the palace, blah, 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 blah. But the biblical authors had no question that Elisha was more than capable of doing things that were supernatural. Just before this, he caused an axe head to float. Okay. So here we are in a situation where Elisha is well aware of everything that the king of Aram is saying. This gets into a bit of a broader perspective that we won't get too much into, but over each of the nations in the ancient world were sons of God, angels, demons, whatever you want to call them, of each of these nations. All of them report back to God. You see this in Job when the Satan comes before Yahweh to ask permission to do what he's going to do. God is the one who's in control. Yahweh is the one who's in control. And so Elisha, one of the prophets of God, the prophet of God, is well aware of what's going on because he knows the source. He gets access to that information. Yahweh speaks with him. And so as a way of proving himself, as a way of protecting the people of Israel, God gives him this information so that he can keep the king safe. All right. So much so that even the other nations recognize the power and the knowledge of Elisha. Wow. So the king, hearing this information, don't know why he didn't know, looks and goes, all right, so here's what we're going to do. We're just going to kill Elisha. It's really simple. Find where he is. We'll ignore the king for now. We'll go surround Elisha. We'll kill him, and then we can kill the king. Sound military strategy, right? Take out the general, take out the informant, and now we've got an upper hand. Great. So they find out that Elisha is in Dothan. Small city, a little bit north of Samaria, no big deal, we can get there. So they dispatch this crack force of people to go. Chariots, horses, strong men, enough that they can surround an entire city, right? So let's say the city's like a modern block in size. It's probably a couple thousand people, more than enough to capture one man and kill him. All right, so we jump to Dothan. Elisha's there, his servant is there. His servant is used to walking with Elisha. He's seen all of these things, but he's got doubts for his own personal safety because he gets up in the morning, he looks over the city walls, and all he sees is the Arameans surrounding. oh no, this is the end. This is what happens. And so Elisha's right beside him with a little bit of a smile on his face. His servant, terrified. Elisha, loving it. Looks out into the crowd, all these people around with just a smile on his face. And his servant is like, we're going to die. Why are you loving this moment? Why do you have that smirk on your face? Like, this is not a good scene. And Elisha knows something that his servant doesn't. He's got access to something, and he has faith in something bigger than his servant does at this moment. I'm not alone. I don't need to fight this battle. This battle is already won. These men cannot hurt me. And so he tells his servant, we got more people on our side than they've got here. And I think, I'm just going to read into this a little bit. I think Elisha is speaking not just on the physical sense. I think he's also speaking on the spiritual sense. Sure enough, the angels of the Arameans have come to do battle, and they've walked right into their own trap, and now they're surrounded by the angels of heaven. Come at me, bro. We can do this. So Elisha prays, Lord, open the eyes of my servant that he would see. And he opens his eyes, and all around him are these chariots of fire in all the hills, as much as he can see, totally outnumbering everything else that's going on. You can imagine Elisha just giving him a nice little nudge. Now you're getting it. Now you're getting it. We've got nothing to fear here. Well, the Arameans have no idea what's going on. They see Elisha. They rush towards Elisha, all of them crashing in. Elisha prays, Lord, would you blind them? Now, I just want you to know the original Hebrew word here has more of a connotation of dazzled, befuddled, confused. Basically, what he's praying is, Lord, let them to be completely confused as to what's going on. Blind in the sense that they no longer see reality. I think that's where the translation is coming from. So they come running in, and Elisha's like, hey guys, you're looking for somebody, eh? Yeah, we're looking for Elisha. We just saw him. Oh yeah, sorry, just missed him, but I can help you. And Elisha walks them, the whole army that's out to pursue him, all the way down to Samaria. It's like 12 miles. Not a short distance, like a good day's journey. Walks them down to the city of Samaria, and now they're there. And then he prays that they open their eyes. They're surrounded. They're in the enemy stronghold. Okay, God, open their eyes now. Now let them see. And all of a sudden, all the Arameans open their eyes, and they see themselves surrounded by Israelites. Uh-oh. We found the king, but not in the way that we wanted. Now we're the ones who are in trouble. Now the king of Israel, is like looking at them. He's chomping at the bit. Shall I kill them? Which is interesting because God actually has rules and laws that says, no, you can't kill a prisoner of war. But he's thinking, maybe I didn't actually, maybe they're not prisoners of war. I'm not the one that captured them. So maybe it's okay for me to just slaughter them and really send the message. But Elisha and God show a unique kind of mercy, because Elisha looks at the king and goes, would you kill the men you've captured with your own sword or bow? The answer is rhetorical. It's a no. You would not. So rather than just sending them home, they treat them like honored guests. They throw them this banquet. How confusing is that? Lord, you're going to set up a banquet in the presence of my enemies. Welcomes them with open arms, feeds them like they've never been sent before, and says, go back to your king. Just let him know what happened here. Let him know how we treated you. We'll see what happens. The story, of course, ends that the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. It's not the end of the story, but it's the end of this story. Lots of things that we can relate to here. I can relate to the king of Aram. Here's a guy who's at war. He's frustrated because nothing seems to be working out. But what he can't see is the reality of what's going on. He's looking at things in practical senses. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And the reality is, we can't accomplish anything unless God's hand is in it. The best laid plans, even the most altruistic plans, will come to nothing unless we're walking in step with God. Okay? So there's the first sense. If I'm with the king of Aram, I get it. I'm laying out my plans. I'm making my war plans. I'm trying to execute them. And it leads me right to the point of trying to track down the very man of God who's protecting them. Rather than looking and saying, hey, maybe God's hand isn't in it. No, hellbent, he's on it. So he sends his men. I'm with Elisha's servant here. So many times in my life, I've looked out and been like, I'm surrounded. There's no way out of this. I don't even know what's going to happen right now. My first desire is to fight. It's to go after. It's to do those things. But what happens when I'm totally outnumbered, when I'm totally outwitted? It's even more frustrating, I'll be honest with you, when I feel like I'm walking in God's plan, when I feel like he's the one who's led me to this place, and then I'm still outnumbered. God, where are you in the midst of this? I think this is the difference between Elisha and his servant. His servant is thinking with his human mind, his human eyes. He's seen all of the miracles, but he hasn't really given God his full faith. Whereas Elisha is all in. He gets it, he knows it, he sees it, he communes with God. You know that there's a ton of work that goes into that relationship behind these scenes. And so he has the eyes of the Lord. He sees into the unseen realm, and he can see the battle that's going on around him. And he goes, there's nothing to fear here. God is so good. We've got nothing to fear. In those moments, what does it look like to have our eyes opened? What does it look like to see those chariots of fire? Hold that question in your mind. The last person that I can really identify with here is the king of Israel. Here you are. You're in a situation where you're at war. You're constantly besieged. You're constantly harried. You can't go anywhere safe. And without Elisha, you'd have been dead hundreds of times over. Eventually, I'm thinking, they're going to get me. And now here, dropped on your doorstep, is the perfect opportunity to wipe out a major force of your enemy. I know in my mind what's right. I know in my mind what God has commanded me to do. I know what that looks like. And yet in this moment, it almost doesn't matter to me. I want to kill them. He's begging Elisha to be able to slaughter them. It would be easy. They're surrounded. They don't even know what's going on. This is the Lord's hand. He's just handed it to me. And Elisha goes, no. Remember the commands the Lord's given you. Remember what it means to be faithful to that. That's your job as the king. Be faithful to what God has given you to do. So we prepare a banquet instead. To the credit of the king, just so I'm not ragging on the poor dude, he follows that command. But that first instinct, we sense that. I sense that in myself. I want to rise up. I want to do these things. And then God pulls me back. Goes, Stephen, remember who I am. Remember the calling on your life. What does it mean to be obedient with me? How does this make you more like me today? Right. Now I'm walking back in step. Let's go back to those chariots of fire. It would be pretty easy for me to interpret this for you, to say, whatever's going on in your life, God's going to surround you. He's going to bless you. He's going to fight for you. You've got nothing to fear. Lots of preachers can do that. It's an easy gospel to preach, but it's a cheap one because it neglects the fact that Elisha is walking in the steps of God. What I'm not saying there is that you need to discern and know the will of God at all times. Lots of different people, or that God won't bless you if you're outside of that. That's also easily disproven. Just look around our world. What I'm saying is that we have nothing to fear to the things that God has called us to. Nothing. There is no weapon that's fashioned against God's people that can stand in the face of who God is. Full stop. So, the first place to start is a heart check. Are you a king of Aram? Are you a king of Israel? Both of them have warring factions. One is looking from a human perspective. The other is looking out of ambition. Only one of them surrenders and follows what God is calling them to do. Are you a servant of Elisha who's afraid of what's in front of you, maybe petrified that you can't move forward in what God's doing, even though you're walking in that step, even though you've confirmed and you know and God has confirmed and the community around you has confirmed, yes, this is what God's doing. Maybe it's time to open your eyes and your eyes to really see what God's up to. Because when we get to the place where we know and trust and follow what God's doing, we're free. There's no weapon, there's no army, there's nothing that can stand in the way of what God's doing. He's with you. He will always be with you. He will fight for you. And often you will find that the battle doesn't even need to happen in the way that it is. Elisha could have prayed a very different prayer. He could have prayed that the armies had wiped out the Aramites, the Arameans. They probably would have. Slaughter. But keep in mind here that Elisha has the long picture because he knows that while he may be able to command a slaughter, what is going to be the retribution for that slaughter? More war. Instead, you make a banquet for them. You send them back. That's humility, humbling, embarrassing. Like you've just sent your army to go find the man of God who's attacking you, who's sharing all of your information. You've been looking for the king of Israel. In fact, your army ended up finding both of them. And what happened? Your enemies looked at you and went, want some food? That's a power play. Love, more powerful than anger. All right, so let's turn to you. Let's turn to me. When we're in those moments where we're afraid, when we're in those moments of feeling completely surrounded, what do? I think we acknowledge the fact that we're like that servant. Lord, I'm afraid. I don't know what's going to happen. But then we allow our faith to take over. The parts of us that are just like Elisha. Lord, open my eyes. Help me with my unbelief. Help me to see you. He'll meet you in that place. It might not be an answer that you like. It might not be the answer that you want, but he will meet you in that place. When you walk in the footsteps of God, when you hold his hand, there is nothing. There's no force on this earth, no force in the heavens above that can hurt you. Full stop. Those armies are greater. Even Jesus on the cross, right? He chose that path. If at any moment in time he wanted out, he had legions to command. Then I look back on my life and I see all the times where I chose doubt, or I chose fear, or I chose anger over love and faith and trust. Yeah, Lord. Open my eyes, that I might see you for who you are, that I might love my enemies rather than attacking them, that I might look at this whole situation with your perspective and not mine. Now you get it. This is the God that I know. The one who fights for us, the one who's on our side, the one who isn't afraid to reprimand us when we step out of line, but who does so in such a kind, gentle, loving way. That's the God who walks with you. Let's pray. God, Dad, help me. Help me with my unbelief. Help me to see with your eyes that I could open them and really understand who you are. For my friends who are struggling through many things, some of whom are looking at the future with natural eyes, and they're laying their war plans and nothing seems to be coming right. Lord, help us to lay them down. That we would come to you. We would say, Lord, in your time, in your way. Some of us are like the king of Israel, where we've got something in front of us that's so easy, so perfect, so right. Help us not to rationalize away all of your commands, to love you and love our neighbors. Some of us are like the servant, and we need our eyes open because our doubt is bigger than our faith. Show us, Lord. Help us with our unbelief. Give us a spirit of Elisha. Lord, some of us are like Elisha. We're walking in those steps. Help us to be faithful, not to put the focus on us, but to constantly give you the glory. Thank you, Father, for the ways you walk with us each step of the way. May the Lord bless you on your journey, wherever that takes you, whatever it happens. If you don't have that personal relationship with God, with Jesus, I'd love to talk. Send me a message. If something's going on in your life that you need prayer for, send me a message. I pray for you regularly. I'd love to pray specifically just for you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He cause His face to shine upon you, and may you always see the chariots of fire. God bless.